Okay, guys.
This is where we started. We stopped here yesterday, right? Did we explain this yesterday? Did I explain this? Okay. We talked about meeting types yesterday, right? Yeah. We say we got, just to recapitulate, we got progress meeting, right? Whereby you report the progress of the meeting, right? My girl, you must listen now because you were not here yesterday. Hello. Focus now because you were not here yesterday. Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, I talked to the slide and presented this. Then we said we have four types of meetings that usually take place in a project environment, right? One of it is progress meetings. It's a kind of a meeting whereby you report the progress of the meeting to the stakeholders. It's very, very important. You need to update them. For example, if you are a stakeholder in a project and you don't know what is happening, in terms of the progress, there is no update, yourself, you will not be happy, right? So, in order to avoid that, to make the stakeholders well informed, there should be meetings at regular intervals, right? It depends on how it is scheduled. Then you have vendors meeting, whereby you meet with the suppliers. Supplier, vendor is the same, right? You need to meet with them, perhaps to iron out important things. For example, if if there will be problem or shortage of supply, they will tell you. If they got complaints, they will table it during the meeting. There you can be able to know their concerns as well. Because if you don't know their concerns, if they have problems, how are you going to deal with it? Right? You need to meet at regular intervals for you to be able to sit together to iron out things of concern. Does it make sense to you? Then we have project board or project steering committee. This one is mostly applicable to big projects, right? In small projects, you don't have something of such nature. So in big project, we have the project board, which in other words can be regarded as project steering committee. They meet as well to decide on the direction of the project. Because this committee, they takes what we call strategic decision about the project. So yeah. Then we have ad hoc. Ad hoc meeting is a kind of a meeting that can be scheduled at any time. For example, if there are certain things that needs to be discussed that appears to be urgent, right? You need to call this type of meeting that is unscheduled. So as we have here, we say meeting scheduled as needed when a specific topic has been discussed and a decision taken, and it cannot wait for the next meeting. So you quickly call an ad hoc to address whatever that needs to be addressed instantly without waiting for the next meeting. Do you understand? Any question? Okay. Now, in terms of project progress report, right? It could be weekly, like it depends on how you schedule it, right? And it depends on the nature of the project. But in most cases, it has to be weekly, right? For example, if you have team members that are working with you, right? You need to brief them in terms of what to do for the week, right? Have you seen something like that? You just like what we are doing here. Every Mondays, although ours is becoming too often now, right? Why is it too often? Because it's registration time. We are still busy with a lot of stuff. So every Mondays, it could be every Mondays or every Friday, you meet with your team members to strategize in terms of what needs to be done, right? There you give directives. They can as well report back to you. And if there are problems that needs to be addressed, there are concerns, it has to be tabled, right? During the meeting. So the weekly team meetings will focus only on exception or problems. It could be problems or it could be yeah. Then tasks that are carried out according to the project plan should be analyzed, right? Tasks or activities. Then the project progress report will typically include what is it going to include, right? The report, actual versus planned progress, usually in form of a project Gantt chart. Yesterday, I was explaining to you what we mean by actual and planned progress. Actual versus planned work. Let's put it that way. Actual is what you have executed so far, what you've done in reality, right? Then the plan is planned progress is what you were supposed to do based on your plan. Remember, a project is always planned ahead of time, right? For example, you could schedule a project to last for 1 month. The simple example I was giving to you yesterday, right? That project is taking or is scheduled to take 4 weeks, right? By the end of third weeks, you're supposed to complete, if all things are going the way it's planned, you're supposed to complete 75%. True of us. By the end of the second week, you're supposed to complete 50%, right? By the end of the first week, you're supposed to complete what percentage? So let's 25%, right? Then by the end of the fourth week, what percentage is supposed to be completed? 100%, right? Okay. Now, if by the end of the second week, you are still struggling to complete 25%, what does it tell you? What does it tell you? It tells you that there is a problem, right? There is a red flag there that you are running behind the schedule. So during the meetings, this something of this nature can be ironed out, right? Can be put on the table, right? The project manager can say, hey man, what is happening now? We're supposed to be at 50%, we are still at 25%. So what is the problem? Right. The problem could be something that is beyond or that could be contextual. Let me put it that way. Maybe it's not the fault of the team members, right? Could be materials were not delivered on time, whatever problem that it may be, they must sit down and address it, right? During such a meeting or when they are making such a report. Does it make sense to you? Right. The reason for deviation, right? Deviation is a kind of you not adhering or sticking to original plan, right? You've set out what you need to do. Now you are not doing exactly what's supposed to be done. You are deviating. So if there are such deviations, it needs to be discussed in the meeting. And reasons must be advanced regarding in terms of or why such deviation is occurring. It could be occurring for maybe perhaps for the benefit of the project or something that could be detrimental to the project. So all these things needs to be discussed about or put together in a report. Does it make sense to you? Are you understanding? What is that your name again? What is that your name again? Huh? So appeal. Ntini, I want to make you laugh. Yesterday she was cross. Yeah, yesterday is past now. Today is another good day, a happy day, right? Then milestones and deliverable completed needs to be reported, right? Then areas of concerns needs to be tabled in the meeting table there. They discuss about it. Then focus for the next week. What you're gonna do the following week, right? It must be discussed. Then, if there's perhaps general comments that needs to be made, it has to be part of the weekly progress report. Doesn't make sense to you. Most of you, you must have been doing something like this, right? Yeah. Then the monthly report. Remember, weekly is shorter than monthly stuff, right? Okay. So, what type of things that can you put together in the monthly report? So when the monthly report is drawn up, it should contain the following: achievement to date, of course, what you've achieved to date, right? You see, a monthly report is not so much different from a weekly report, but you are reporting now for much longer time than the weekly report, right? Then achievement to date, what you've achieved up to date needs to be reported. Then activities completed versus activity schedule. Activities completed versus activity schedule is more or less like planned work versus actual work. It's the same. We are just using different language here, right? Then we said actual resources usage versus schedule resources or resource usage. Actual resource usage versus schedule resource usage. You still have to be very careful, or yes, let me put it this way. You still have to be very mindful in terms of your resources usage. Do you understand what I mean? Because you don't want a situation whereby, for example, you've completed 25% of the work, right? Now the resources usage is 50%. That means you are wasting money. Do you get a picture of what I'm trying to say now? If you completed 25% of the work, the resources usage must be 25%. Right. So, in a situation that, for example, let's put it in another scenario. You've completed 50%, right? And the resources usage is 40%. Well done. You're saving money. You understand what I mean? You can as well save money, in a project. It doesn't necessarily mean that when they say it's 10,000, you must spend the 10,000. If you can be able to save, it's a good job, well done. You got a credit to yourself. Perhaps they can give you a bonus from that. Right. So we must always be considerate of that as well. Then the next one is quality report. Of course, quality reports needs to be there because you must make sure that when you deliver, right, you don't just have to deliver nonsense, right? Mind you, whatever you are doing, one of the utmost consideration is quality. Quality, right? So you must make sure that you submit a report based on the quality, how the quality standard or the quality plans in place for you to be able to enhance that the final product, or rather the deliverables, the outcome of the project is uh, as per what was set out to achieve based on the project objectives. Are you still with me? Then deliverables completed. Deliverables completed. What do we mean by deliverables? The deliverables that are completed, outcomes. So you should be able to put in your monthly report the outcomes you've achieved so far. Let me use that language, so far, right? Then deliverables rejected. If perhaps there were certain deviations, right, whereby certain deliverables were annulled. You know what I mean by annul? Cancel, right? Annul. You know annul. Do you know how to spell annul? ANNUL. If you want to make it past tense, ed, annul, right? When we say annul means cancel, right? Yeah. So if there were certain deliverables that were rejected or annulled, it must be reported as well. Do you understand that? Then you must provide reasons. Why did you decide to cancel these deliverables as the case may be? Then change report including any major changes requested and the action that were taken. Remember, I told you about scope, right? Scope is very important. It's always important you stick to the scope of the project, right? If perhaps there's any, for whatever reason, let me put it that way, if perhaps for whatever reason you got need to change the scope of the project, you change it and it must be reported. But I've already told you that you cannot just make a change like that. It has to follow the normal protocol, right? Once the protocol has been observed, then you make a change. It has to be reported in the meeting as well, so that everybody will know about it. You understand what I mean? Then the action that we're taking needs to be reported. The amount of effort expended to date on working on the changes must be reported. You see, you just have to be plain. You just have to make sure that whatever is being done in the project is not hidden. Everybody must know about it. It must be reported in the meeting. Right. So those are the things that needs to be reported in the monthly report. The risk as well needs to be reported. Risk, the project risk. You know what we mean by risk, right? Okay. Risk can be seen as events, uncertain events that could happen, right, to a project. And when it happens, sometimes it could be positive, right? Positive impact on the project. It can as well be negative, right? So those things needs to be reported in a monthly meeting. And the progress on risk strategies and action. So what are we trying to say here now in terms of the progress on risk strategies and action? Remember, before you start a project, one of the things that needs to be done is to identify the risk in the project. Right. During your planning stage, you need to identify the risk. Risk means things that can make the project not to be realizable. Then, when you've identified the various risks, what do you do next? You do what we call risk assessment. Right. So, risk assessment, what does it entail? You here you do what we call try to assess the risk in terms of the probability of the risk happening versus the impact. Right. So there you will be able to establish the type of the nature of the risk. Then what else you do after that? You need to come up with a strategy, right? We got different strategies. I think we've done that. If we haven't, we are still going to refresh all those stuff. Work can go back again and so that I can refresh your mind in due course. So you got mitigation, right? Mitigation as a strategy to deal with the risk. What does that entail? You reduce the impact of the risk, right? You can transfer a risk. How do you transfer a risk? By taking up insurance policy, right? You can reject. So these are the strategies. So all these things needs to be reported in the monthly meeting, right? How progress on risk strategies and action that has been taken. Then new risk identified, right? So yeah, it's possible that during the execution of the project, new risk could creep in. So those new risks that have crept in must be identified. And the risks that have been closed needs to be identified. Request for project board action. I told you if it's a big project, that one needs to be uh, reported as well, recommendation to the project board, and any request to the project board, including action recommendation and activity plan. Remember, weekly plan, you must include activity plan for the following week. Same with monthly report. Then activity plan for next month needs to be reported, and highlight of major milestones ahead for the project needs to be reported. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think the period is over now. Right. I'm gonna stop here. So far, so good. And I wish you a very lovely, fantastic weekend. Right. Thank you. Wait, I'm doing something. No.